Hello everyone, and a very happy Valentine's Day to you all. Welcome to another episode of RPGs with Paddy. I'm Paddy. Today we're going to be looking at the great supplement, Does Love Forgive? This video will look at the first scenario, Love You to Death, but be sure to check out my video on the second scenario, Mask of Desire. There are two one-shot scenarios included in this supplement for Call of Cthulhu, and you can play with either the starter set or the Keeper's Rulebook. These great scenarios are based on love and desire. They were originally written in Polish by Anna Maria Mazur and Irish Kaminska. Hope I'm pronouncing that alright. And they were published by Black Monk Games. But Lynn Hardy, famous in Chaosium, liked the scenarios so much that she worked with the original authors to translate them into English. Chaosium also interviewed Anna and Irish, and you can find the post on the Chaosium blog with a link in the description. Both of these scenarios are one-to-one games, meaning there will be one keeper and only one player, so it can be very intimate. In this video, I'll go through the extra considerations you should have for such an intimate game, and then we'll look at the first scenario, Love You to Death. So, let's get started. Because the games are one-to-one and deal with such a deeply personal emotion such as love, before running these games, the keeper should read through them and then discuss any potentially problematic plot elements with the player. Depending on the real-life past of the player, they may not be comfortable with the nature of some of the NPCs. So keep an eye on this. First of all, discuss it, and then keep an eye on it when you're playing throughout the game, and be prepared to kind of pull back or even stop if the player is uncomfortable. Work with the player to kind of improve the problematic point until it's okay, or remove it. The last line, which they say here, is important, that says, the idea of the game is to have fun, and respecting each other's wishes is a key to that experience. So now let's move on to the mechanics that we should consider. In both of these games, the players are alone, but the characters have very useful contact NPCs who they should be able to draw on for help. Even if something is not listed in that character's stat block, there should always be someone who can help the investigator. Of course, there may be a price to pay for that help, but there should always be help available. Another important consideration is using luck. There is an optional rule in the Keeper rulebook called Spending Luck. I use it all the time. I use it in all of my games. But basically, if you roll your die and you don't pass the test, you can spend luck points on a one-to-one basis to reduce your die roll until it becomes a success, or a hard success, or even an extreme success. So for example, if you rolled a 65, but you needed a 60, you could spend 5 points of luck to succeed. So your luck goes down by 5 points, and your roll reduces from 65 to 60, so now it's a success. Or you could spend 35 points of luck to get a hard success, bringing that 65 all the way down to a 30. But don't forget, it will reduce your luck score, which makes you more likely to fail luck rolls in the future. You can't use luck, spending luck on sanity rolls or on luck rolls themselves. And you can't use it to increase damage or anything like that, only on your D100 rolls. So including this rule in one-to-one scenarios is important in my opinion, because just a single bad roll can kind of derail the scenario, especially if there's a less experienced keeper who doesn't know exactly how to get the story back on track. So that's all the background info you should know. Let's get stuck into the scenario. Love You to Death is set one day after the St. Valentine's Day massacre in Chicago in 1929. The investigator will be a private detective who has connections both with the police and with the criminal underworld as well. There are some key points you should include when creating your character. They should be between 23 and 26. There are a few important skills that they probably should include. One should be a social skill, especially charm, persuade, or intimidate. They should also have relatively high scores in psychology and spot hidden. Those are kind of like the three really important ones for this scenario. But also listen and stealth can be quite useful. I like that they include this in the start of the scenario, because then players won't end up wasting a lot of points in irrelevant fields. Especially this is important in one-to-one games where, you know, another player doesn't have that skill. So it's important to tell your players what maybe you should be spending your points in when creating your character. So before developing the character's backstory, there are a few things that you should know. And this is, well, first one is given in handout number 1. So I'll show it here, but I'll give you the important points. You grew up in an orphanage and your best friend was Hattie James. Is that right? I thought it was Hattie May. Anyway, I might say Hattie May later during the review, but Hattie James. So your best friend was Hattie James, who always stood up for you. You used to play riddles with each other, where you would write down notes and hide them behind a loose tile in your bathroom, or in the bathroom. Hattie shared a big secret with you, that she had found a litter of puppies and was taking care of them. This kind of created a strong bond between you two, and you helped her out with the puppies, sneaking out to take care of them. One day, a staff member saw you sneaking out, but luckily another orphan, Ellen O'Sullivan, noticed this and ran out to warn you, so you were able to, you know, not alert them to the presence of the puppies. Ellen was a younger Irish girl at the orphanage who looked up to both you and Hattie, but she had been too shy to talk to you before. But from this point on, the three of you became good friends. As you grew older, Ellen fell in love with you, but you didn't feel the same way. Ellen was pretty devastated by this, and she said she never wanted to see you or Hattie again, because she seemed to blame Hattie for this. Ellen was soon adopted, and after that she started writing letters to you constantly, but she never provided a return address. She still writes to you now every now and again. You still have a faded photograph of the three of you from when you were around 12 or 13 years old. And although you have fallen out of touch with Ellen, Hattie has remained a good friend of yours throughout the years. So after that, so that's handout 1, after that you should give the players handout 2, which is a recent letter from Ellen. It says that she is in Chicago now, and it talks about the secret place she likes to go up by the water tower, which only the investigator, she's only told the investigator about. She is clearly still infatuated with the investigator and says that their paths may soon cross. This is not so important right now, but it will be important later. Just a quick note to the keeper as well. Ellen thinks that the reason the investigator rejected her is because the investigator was in love, possibly still is in love, with Hattie. And this can be totally true or false if the player wants. If the player liked Hattie, did Hattie like the investigator back? Or maybe she never even knew? Or maybe there was no love there, it was just a platonic friendship all along. The player can decide that, but Ellen still thinks what she thinks. She believes that she was rejected because the investigator is in love with Hattie. Oh, and there's also a point here as well. When you're creating your investigator character, they can be a man or a woman. It doesn't really matter. So there's also the option, if you want to go back to the orphanage time and role play out a few scenes to establish these relationships a little bit more. There's no information or no scenes are really provided, just kind of little seeds like doing the riddles or protecting the litter of puppies and something like that. You can do that if you want, but it's not necessary. And you could equally have flashback scenes during the game if you wanted to kind of stretch it out a little bit more as well. So during character creation, there's also 2 other connections you should make. You have a connection to Officer Bart Chikarsky, I hope I'm saying that right, at the Chicago Police Department, and Billy Littlecombe Brock, who is a mobster. The connections are given in handout 3. And basically they say, as a private detective, you and Officer Chikarsky have helped each other out on cases over the years. Billy Brock got in with the wrong crowd and you managed to save him. The details aren't exactly given, but basically he owes you. He seems to know everyone in the criminal underworld, so he's a very useful contact. So now we can move on to the plot. So Ellen clearly, as you can see from the letter, she still mourns her rejection by the investigator and harbours an undying love for him or her. She keeps writing letters to make sure the investigator doesn't forget her. She was always interested in the supernatural and started investigating it more after she was adopted. A close family friend, Yvonne Lacour, took Ellen under her wing to teach her the occult practices, but also how to get money from rich people with seances and so on. Ellen adopted the stage name of Mairead and calls herself a mystic. Years later, Lacour was tired of her own body and wanted to transfer into a new body by using the mind transfer spell. Ellen helped her set up the ritual, not knowing that Ellen herself was the target. But fortunately, or unfortunately, Ellen was able to withstand it and Lacour's spirit was lost in the void. Now, Ellen is planning on transferring her mind into Hattie's body so that she can end up with the investigator. So Ellen has moved back to Chicago, and knowing that Hattie married a mobster, started doing group spiritual readings for the mobsters' wives. Ellen dyed her hair red and wears a kind of a face covering, which makes her appear more mystic, but also keeps Hattie from recognizing her. Hattie was reluctant to go to the sessions, but eventually did. Ellen was originally planning on using a long con, gradually winning Hattie's trust and eventually using mental suggestion to invite Hattie back to Ellen's apartment for the mind transfer ritual. But Ellen noticed Hattie's reluctance and decided she had to act sooner. So Ellen cast mental suggestion, but somehow Hattie managed to resist it and she just kind of got a headache. Hattie now vows never to go back. Another mobster's wife and a friend of Hattie, Lucille Morgan, was there and noticed that Ellen had tried some kind of mental influence over Hattie, and Lucille decided to bring Hattie a silver ankh pendant with protective powers and a magical dagger to protect herself, giving her the kind of cryptic message, you can use it to protect yourself not only against people. Hattie had initially been worried by the mental attack, but after a night's sleep, she shrugged it off and was not worried. She actually decided to put the amulet on her dog's collar because her dog is always with her. We also get quick and useful descriptions of all the major players in this scenario, including a physical description, their traits, and role-playing hooks. This is really, really good. Just a quick review. This is what this player is like. This is how you can role-play them. Next, we get a bit of background information on the Valentine's Day massacre. Basically, some mobsters dressed up as police to kill some other gangsters. And that plays a key kind of background role in this scenario. But let's get started on the opening scene. So there is a knock at the door of your private investigator's office, and there is Hattie asking if she can speak to you urgently. She is heartbroken and very emotional. The investigator probably has heard about the massacre, but the names of the dead have not been released. Hattie then explains that her husband is dead. Hattie knew about his mobster connections, but he wasn't a full gang member, so she can't understand why he was killed. Not only that, but her German Shepherd, Highball, was taken by the police. Highball was there during the attack and tried to bite several police officers, so the police won't release the dog and he's going to be put down very soon, despite Highball being a very friendly animal. And just a quick aside here, there's some talk about, potential animal death in this scenario, but for the keeper, you'll notice very soon the dog is not going to be put down. You're going to rescue the dog. There is a point later in the scenario where the dog might potentially be killed, but definitely be aware of that with your players, because for some people, animal death is more tragic than human death when they think about it like that. So you can kind of gloss over that, or you can kind of make sure that the dog doesn't die. So that's just something just to keep in mind. So back to the scenario. Hattie begs for help, knowing that the investigator has connections with the police, and she just doesn't want her dog to be put down. She takes off her scarf, gives it to the investigator, saying, take it to Highball so he can sniff it and be comforted by my smell. She also gives the investigator a photograph of her with Hattie so that the police know the investigator is acting on Hattie's behalf. Now she has to go back to her apartment to sort out matters about her husband's death and, yeah, she can tell the investigator her address here as well, or just remind it. A psychology roll here reveals that Hattie is hiding something, and if pressed, she says she wouldn't be able to cope with the loss of both her husband and her dog so close together. And again, this is kind of like a bit of a callback to the incident with the puppies at the orphanage. And the underlying reason for the fear, which she will not reveal, is that she feels someone has been watching her. And if that's right, then maybe she needs the dog back with her with the protective amulet to, protect Hattie. Hattie doesn't want to endanger the investigator in whatever's going on, so she hopes that you can just get the dog out of prison, dog prison, whatever it is, and not be involved in anything else. But none of this is expressed. This is just for the keeper's role-playing information. So next you should go to the police station. The investigator is a regular there, so they know their way around and they can quickly meet Officer Chikarsky. Officer Chikarsky will take the investigator right to Highball. He already knows what has happened with John May's death and the massacre, and he can be convinced with either a charm or a persuade roll to share some information, including Frank Gusenberg's statement, handout 4, and a list of massacre victims and suspects, handout 5. So we'll just have a very quick look at that. So this is the statement by a witness. Despite suffering from 14 gunshot wounds, Mr. Gusenberg initially claimed that no one had opened fire on him. That's a typical gangster. When his level of painkillers was reduced, it was possible to gain limited information concerning the course of events. The victims were in the building at 2122 North Clark Street. 2 men dressed in police uniforms and armed with submachine guns entered the property and ordered the occupants to line up facing the wall, under the pretext of arresting them. The witness many times emphasized that a German Shepherd dog, also present in the building, started to bark as soon as the killers entered the garage. He claimed that the attackers took several shots at the dog. The animal initially appeared to have been killed, but revived after the gunman left the building, and was apparently unharmed. The witness did not give any information that could be helpful during the investigation. And then the other handout 5 is just a list of the victims and the suspects. So the statement is just kind of giving a little bit more information about the dog Highball as an important NPC in this scenario, and the list of suspects is not really important, except that it has Hattie's wife on the list of victims. So once you get to Highball's cage, Highball has been very aggressive anytime a police officer is coming near, but reacts very positively as soon as the investigator comes in because he can smell Hattie's scent from the scarf. After a good sniff of the scarf, the dog is then very obedient to the investigator. Officer Chikarsky will allow the investigator to take the dog out if there's some proof that they're acting on behalf of the owner, and the photo from Hattie is enough to convince him of that. So now, heading back to Hattie's apartment to reunite her with Highball, the front door is open. Hattie is not here, but there's no sign of a break-in either. This is strange that there's no note even, because Hattie was expecting the investigator. Hattie's purse is open on the floor next to a desk, and the dagger is sticking out. An appraise or history or a hard no roll will identify it as a conjar. And a successful occult roll says they are usually used to enchanted to fight demons and other supernatural beings. If they investigate the apartment, a spot hidden roll will find the loose tile in the bathroom. And again, this is calling back to memories of their childhood in the orphanage. And behind that, there is a folded piece of paper, and it contains 2 riddles for the players left in case something happens to Hattie. So Highball will start to sniff around the apartment and then start barking to draw the investigator to the bathroom if they haven't already checked it out. The riddles are given in handout 6 and read, number 1, even without being asked, it will answer willingly, and it can speak any and all languages fluently, although bashfully. It will not speak first. It will repeat after you the things most versed. And number 2, it has no bones but has a spine, and while its leaves turn, they do not change colour. It cannot speak, yet it is never short of tales to tell. So the answers for these are echo and book. If the player can't figure those out, they can make an intelligence roll. And if they want to figure it out, just let them take the time for that. If not, they can roll an intelligence roll. And if they fail the intelligence roll, Highball will draw their attention towards it. There is a book called Echo on the bookshelf in the main room. It's actually Hattie's diary and talks about the witchcraft meetings and about Lucille Moran's warnings and gifts. So after you get that, you want to ask the neighbours about it, and they can tell the investigator that Hattie left the apartment with a dark-haired woman. Hattie seemed distracted and didn't respond to the neighbour's greeting as she was leaving, even though Hattie always responds. A description of the woman Hattie was with is below average height, of slender build, and very piercing green eyes. So just a background information here as well. Ellen had been watching the apartment, but she couldn't use spells because of Highball's protective amulet. But when the dog was absent, Ellen decided to strike. So now the investigator has two options, either to find Hattie or to go to Lucille Morgan to get more information about why she feared for her friend. If you attempt to find Hattie, an extreme intelligence roll will allow you to connect Ellen's green eyes with the letter Ellen sent in January, or just the Ellen had green eyes. You know that they described the woman she was with as having green eyes, and then you can look at the letter from January, because the letter will hint towards where she might be taking Hattie. Alternatively, you could use the scarf and try to get Highball to track his owner, and this would require a hard track roll from Highball. His track is 70%, so you'd have to roll 35% or lower. And so if either of those succeed, you can jump ahead to kind of like the final scene, really, or well, at least to Hattie's apartment. But before that, let's look at if you want to meet Lucille Morgan first. So Lucille is the wife of an important mobster, so you need a connection to get a meeting. So you should talk to Billy Littlecombe Brock to find out how to reach her. So Billy, and the investigators will know this, is usually in Dorothy's diner. When they arrive, Billy is friendly and kind of does baby talk with the dog at first, if the dog is present. But when the investigators say they want to meet Lucille Moran, Billy suddenly becomes very serious and wants to know why. But provided the investigator is relatively open and honest, Billy goes out to make some calls, and he returns later and gives them the address at Parkway Hotel and a time, warning them not to be late. So then the player should go up, and of course they should not be late. And as soon as the player mentions that Hattie is missing, Lucille says that Hattie is in mortal danger and must be found immediately. She will tell the investigators all she knows about the witchcraft meetings, and Lucille also talks about giving Hattie the amulet and the dagger. A psychology roll reveals that Lucille is holding something back, and if pressed, she reveals that she was wondering why Mystic Mairead would want to harm Hattie, so she looked into her a little bit more and found out that Mystic Mairead is just a pseudonym, and her real name is Ellen O'Sullivan. She hadn't mentioned it before because why would it be relevant? Most mystics use a stage name or something like that. But, of course, to the investigator, Ellen O'Sullivan should be an important revelation. So if the investigator then shares their information with Lucille, Lucille talks about a spell that her nene told her about, which was about switching minds into another body permanently. If Highball is there, at this point, Lucille will notice the ankh on the collar and demands to know why Hattie is not wearing it, and she insists on the importance of finding Hattie immediately and getting this protective amulet to her. So there is an optional extra complication that you can add in here if you want to maybe delay the investigator getting to the place of the ritual, and that is a contact of the investigator who is a reporter is trying to find out more about the massacre, and maybe they notice the investigator with the dog, with Highball, who was present at the massacre. Maybe that information has got out. So they try to force the investigator into giving up some juicy information. I won't go into it too much here because it's just a small thing and it's kind of off track a little bit, but you can add it in if you want to delay it or stretch out the scenario a little bit more. But now, onto the final scene. If the investigators know of Ellen's presence, they will likely know where to go, which is the water tower at Ellen's apartment, which you can know from the letter. If they don't know, Highball can help track down his missing owner. As they get closer to the water tower, Highball gets on very high alert, and he can easily track Hattie with no roll required. He starts to growl softly as they get closer and closer to Ellen's apartment, but he becomes quiet at the building, kind of knowing, okay, this is it, we need to be quiet. We don't want to kind of alert them. A very smart dog. And so the doorman or the janitor at the apartment can tell them which apartment Ellen lives in, and maybe a few bucks might loosen their tongues. They can also, if you ask, they can recognize the description of Hattie and say, yeah, she was with her an hour ago, or however long it has been since the investigating started. When you go up to the door, no sounds can be heard from within the apartment, and if you get in by either bribing the janitor or breaking down the door, no one is here. But Hattie's coat and hat that she was wearing this morning when she met the investigator are there. There's nothing else of interest in the apartment, and Highball starts to become very fidgety the longer you stay looking. And of course, they are up on the rooftop at the water tower. An intelligence roll can point them this way if the investigator doesn't, or if the player doesn't think about it themselves. And otherwise, Highball can probably lead them upstairs. Just keep going up, 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 up. So then you'll get to a door leading out to the rooftop. And if the player is approaching the roof door quietly, allow them to do a stealth roll so that Ellen doesn't notice them. If the investigator instead decides to rush out, or they fail their stealth roll, then Ellen will be alerted and will start casting the mind transfer spell as quickly as possible. If she doesn't notice them, like a successful stealth roll, she will continue gloating over Hattie, revealing her plan before starting the ritual. The only way to save Hattie once the ritual has begun is by interrupting it. Once the rite is completed, the mind transfer will start and can't be stopped. The mind transfer spell takes 5 rounds to cast. If Ellen is shot or Highball attacks or anything like that before the rite is completed, then Ellen's soul will be lost forever and her body will die. But if Ellen manages to complete the ritual, then Hattie's soul will be banished and lost forever. If the investigator intervenes before the ritual starts, then Ellen will try to use the mental suggestion spell on them. So the investigator has 2 main options in front of them now. Either get the amulet to Hattie or deal with Ellen directly. If you set Highball free, he will run straight to Hattie. And the investigator should then probably shout out to Hattie to take the amulet, maybe tied up, but with a free hand, just kind of grab the amulet and hold on tight. On a failed luck roll, Ellen will notice the amulet and goes to kill the dog with her ritual knife. If Ellen managed to kill Highball or grab Highball, then she will rip the amulet off and throw it over the roof. And again, just be careful playing this if your player is particularly sensitive to animal cruelty. But if you take care of Ellen first, you can try talking to her or attacking her. It is also possible that the investigator arrives too late, having delayed too long, kind of trying to gather too much information, or possibly by alerting Ellen by smashing in the door to her apartment. Maybe that alerted her and she decided to cast it early. So in that case, they will arrive on the rooftop to find Hattie standing over Ellen's body with a knife in her hand. And Hattie claims that she accidentally stabbed Ellen after a struggle. A hard psychology roll will suggest that Hattie is lying, but if you try and push her on this, she just starts crying and asks to be taken home. And, this is kind of reasonable enough. She's just, her husband has been killed, her dog was taken in and was going to be put down. One of her old friends kidnapped her and was trying to kill her, maybe. Well, she doesn't know. But Highball, the dog, if he is present, he knows something is wrong and immediately goes berserk in the presence of his owner, snapping and growling at her. The investigator needs to pass a hard strength roll to keep hold of the dog. Otherwise, he will attack Hattie until you can get control of him again, or until Hattie is dead. If Highball is not present, potentially being left in the apartment, then on the walk home, Hattie talks about how much she appreciates all the investigator has done for her and how deep her feelings for you really are. Back at the apartment, Highball will attack, which should be enough of a hint for the investigator to know what's going on, or that something is wrong anyway. But at whatever point, once the investigator knows that Ellen has succeeded, then there will be a sanity roll to make. The investigator might not know what exactly has happened if they haven't already talked to Lucille. So, there are many possible endings depending on how it played out in your game, but the final scene should provide closure to the player about the event. One more note that I skipped over during this for simplicity reasons is that the investigator may ask either or both of Officer Chikarsky or Billy Littlecombe Brock to come along and help out. Officer Chikarsky, as a police officer, can, for example, order the janitor to open Ellen's room quietly, but he will refuse to allow unjustified murder or break-ins. Billy, on the other hand, doesn't have the same police backing, but is more gung-ho about violence and breaking laws. In the rooftop confrontation, Ellen may use the mental suggestion to tell Billy or Officer Chikarsky to attack the investigator, or vice versa as well. So there we have it. That is the first scenario, Love You to Death, from the 2-scenario collection, Does Love Forgive? I think it is a really tight scenario that gets its story across very well. The backstory provides you with the connections needed to motivate your character to get into the story. Because it's a one-to-one scenario, it's quite intimate, and that can make the horror all the more terrifying. Using flashbacks throughout the game can make the player feel the connection to the other orphans more than just by reading about it at the start. But I highly recommend this game. It's pretty rules light, fairly straightforward story with some occult magic, but without any mythos creatures. All in all, it is a great one-to-one scenario. Okay, and that is going to do it for now. I might be able to crank out my review for the second scenario, Mask of Desire, today, but if not, then you'll get it tomorrow. So, happy Valentine's Day, everyone. I hope you have a great day, and it will be even better if you choose to run this game. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!